What's going on, everyone? Hunter and Drew here from Philly Insider. We've got a special guest on today. We got Alex Carr on here. Some of you might know him from Twitter. I got his Twitter in the description, so make sure you guys check that out if you get a chance. But Alex, just let the people know where you're at and where they can find you and what you do.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Alex. For those of you who don't know me, at Alex Carr MLB on Twitter. You can find me there. I've taken a step back from the writing space, so I guess I'm a free agent. But loving following this baseball season, loving having a good time, and always enjoying hopping on and getting to talk with fine folks like y'all. So I'm pumped to be here. Really excited.
Yeah, just noticed the
Glad to
pitching
have you.
hat too. So
Yeah,
That's a W.
I
That
mean,
is a
there's
W.
everything. You got the 1980 World Series up there. You got Aaron Judge over there. You got a whole bunch of stuff. Mike Schmidt's up there with Snoopy. They're
I
just
see that.
chilling. It's great. We're having a great time.
I need to get some of my stuff in the background.
This is like I feel like the most eclectic gathering of things I could ever have. My dog's obsessed with Snoopy. There's a picture of my dog there too that my partner painted, and then that's like this is Magic the Gathering art. Because I'm a massive loser. There's like anything from Studio Ghibli to anime to my childhood teddy bear to everything. My background is an eclectic mess of there's Avatar: The Last Airbender up there. Anyway, books. You can learn a lot about me just from looking at my background here.
True. But I think we can hop into some Phil's content here a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So I guess we'll lead off with probably the biggest storyline in the spring here. It's going to be Pache or Rojas. Just wanted to kind of get your opinion on that.
Yeah, it's a spicy topic. Listen, if I were in any semblance of control of the Philadelphia Phillies, I would probably say that Christian Pache should make the roster over Jake Cave. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. But I do think that every Phillies fan should be thrilled that Christian Pache is playing the way that Christian Pache is playing, because at the end of the day, if he doesn't make the 40-man roster, you better believe there's going to be trade interest. The Phillies can always just say, hey, we really like Christian Pache. We are thinking of rostering him. But if you had an offer for this fine player right here, you feel free to submit it. I'll tell you, he's probably not going to make it to waivers. I mean, there are so many teams out there. Granted, Michael A. Taylor is still a free agent, so that's probably the equivalent of what you'd be doing here. So there are options in free agency that does kind of lower his value a little bit. But I guarantee there is somebody out there that wants to take a shot on a former number one prospect. With how he's been playing this spring. I mean, everything off of his bat has been blistered. He's making some fantastic plays in the outfield. He's a really good player. I'm a fan. And I say all of that to then say the Phillies see Johan Rojas as a future part of this organization, and they don't see that in Christian Pache. And I can state that in ink. Yeah. As much as we want to be swayed by recency bias, as much as we want to be, we want to be thrilled with what we've seen from Pache. And yeah, it's been great. I mean, he's hitting right-handers. That's a big step forward. The Phillies have done some work with him, and he seems to be finding a stroke, and he's doing quite well. And that's a valuable player to have. But that's a player that needs regular at-bats. And Christian Pache is not going to find those regular at-bats in Philadelphia, regardless of what role he assumes, because Brandon Marsh exists. So you're either saying, I want Brandon Marsh to take the majority of the at-bats and put Christian Pache on the bench, or you're saying, I want Johan Rojas to be in center field, Brandon Marsh stays in left field, right? But either way, Christian Pache would be splitting time. He would not have a regular role here, right? So this improvement that we are seeing from Christian Pache, it's great. But he's a guy that needs regular at-bats, and he needs to flourish in that scenario, and he's not going to find that scenario in Philadelphia no matter what. Yeah, Whit Merrifield is here too, right? So there's so much that would need to happen in order for Christian Pache to find regular at-bats in Philadelphia. So the most likely scenario is that he probably gets traded. I would imagine there's more trade interest for him than there is for Jake Cave, but it's a profitable move, right? Like they initially traded. Oh, I'm gonna feel so bad for forgetting Billy Free Sullivan. Yes, Billy Sullivan. Slay. They traded Billy Sullivan, right? Delaware product, local guy. Love Billy. Also a huge win for them out of the draft. The fact that they managed to rehabilitate him and do all that great stuff. And Billy was great, but, obviously he has not thrived with the athletics organization. And you're probably going to be getting back more than you gave up for Christian Pache, which is outstanding. You got to be thrilled about that, right? But Johan Rojas has a future in this organization. And whether you love him or for some reason people are just finding reasons to complain about every single player on this roster, especially the ones that are homegrown and that are probably generational defenders in the outfield. But, that's a different topic altogether. Johan Rojas has a future here. He is a very, very, very good baseball player and has for a long time been my favorite prospect I've ever gotten to cover in this entire organization for the time that I've been doing it. So whether you like it or not, he's probably, I would go as far as to say it's basically a lock, regardless of how bad his spring is, that Johan Rojas is the team's starting center fielder for at least the first month or two of the season.
Yeah, I would say I probably agree with that, barring an injury, obviously.
Of course. These things can all change. But
yeah, it can change in the flip, like in an instant. I mean, if Nick Castellanos gets hurt, you probably see Pache on the open.
Let the Yankees serve as the prime example. One day, your ace and your star player can be completely healthy, and the next, they cannot be, right?
Yeah.
Anything can change, but as things currently stand, Johan Rojas is making this team. There's no way that he doesn't.
Sure.
Yep, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and on that note, I want to ask you too, as far as the insurance plan goes, let's say we're at June and he's not hitting up to the standard they want him to hit at, and he can't be up in the big leagues. I would guess your insurance plan at that point is Marsh center field and probably Witt playing more reps in left field. Do you think at that point they probably look to the market that hasn't really been good for the outfield? Like the outfield market really hasn't been good over the past year or so. Do you think they look to that market for a trade and then keep Merrifield as that 10th man? What's your thoughts on that?
I actually think that's what's amazing. And again, why I just don't understand why there was so much uproar about the Whit Merrifield signing. If that's your worst case scenario, what are we doing? Like, why are we complaining? I don't care if it costs them $8 million. Not my money. Like, you're one of the best contact hitters in the sport up until maybe the second half of last year, being your backup left fielder and a guy that is, by all intents and purposes, looking to take a huge step forward this year in Brandon March. I don't know why we're complaining about that. I was baffled by the uproar about the Whit Merrifield signing. It was absolutely crazy to me. But I think that's exactly what they would do. And I don't think they would, look at the outfield market. Maybe they'd look for an upgrade off the bench. Obviously, you lose a player, you want to add a player back, but I don't think they'd look for any serious upgrade, barring serious struggles for Whit Merrifield or barring serious struggles with Brandon Marsh against left-handed pitching in an extended sample. I don't think that's anything they're really going to be looking for. I think that this team, so many people want to say, they didn't really do a lot to upgrade. They didn't really do a lot to, they just are kind of running it back with the same squad. Yeah, you're running it back with an extra 2 months of Bryce Harper. You're running it back with an extra, hopefully a good version of Trey Turner. This team was one win away from the World Series last year, right? And the year prior was in the World Series, right? And now you're just getting better versions of the same players. Like, and sure, there will be some regression across the board. Like maybe you see a little bit of regression from Bryson Stott. Maybe you see, I guess the most likely guy to talk about is Brandon Marsh, right? But like at that point, your star players are probably playing like star players, which they, for quite a while last season, they weren't able to do. So I don't know. I find it hard to say that the Phillies are going to be worse than they were in 2023. That seems a little far-fetched.
Right. And I think like, just my bad.
You go ahead.
I'll just add a quick point on the Witt thing too. I think you look back at the last year in the playoffs, and I see Adam Duvall obviously signs today for $3 million, and I think there's a big uproar for that. Obviously, we don't know if there's mutual interest, all that stuff. But at the same time, I think you look at the amount of strikeouts we had and how there were certain situations in game 6 and 7 where especially game 7, you put the ball in play and you probably win that baseball game, especially game 7. And with adding in a guy like Adam Duvall, I don't think you necessarily get that. You're adding a lot more strikeouts to the lineup. While you get a lot more maybe upside with the power there, that is a concern of mine. And I think if Rojas is a concern, and like you said, we're in that worst case scenario, Witt's probably going to put the ball in play in that situation 9 times out of 10. And you're probably getting a run there.
I think that it is just nuts that we're going to look at Adam Duvall's 2023 and then we're going to look at Whit Merrifield's 2023. Listen, Witt's body broke down on him. I get it. Whit Merrifield was an all-star in 2023 for good reason. He was having a resurgent season at age 34, right? And this is not a guy who depends on, power to play the game. Right? He is a contact first, hit it where they ain't kind of player. And that is the end all be all of Whit Merrifield. That kind of talent typically ages relatively well, right? If you have that good bat control, you have those, as long as your hands aren't wearing down on you, you can still, adjust and keep your bat in the zone long enough to make some contact. You are probably going to age just fine. I mean, yeah, he's probably more of a bench player / role player now than he was a few years ago, but he still has so many tools that the Phillies as a whole in the aggregate lack, right? He is, basically another Bryson Stott in this scenario, but right-handed and able to be your first guy up, your first man up off the bench, able to be, a guy that, like it or not, is going to serve as, that third guy on the depth chart at third base, at shortstop, right? At least he can stand there, right? That's important to have. You have those games and you have those scenarios where the depth chart wears thin. It really is. Now, the one thing that I will say, I'll segue off of this to my own little tangent, I suppose. The one place that I could see them upgrading prior to the season start is that left-handed outfielder space. I don't know if Jake Cave is going to be the guy that makes this team. I'm a little confused as to why the Phillies weren't on top of Eddie Rosario. They might have been. I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but I would assume that he looked at the Nationals and said, oh, there's a regular playing space here. Maybe I have a better shot to crack camp with them. But him getting a minor league deal was the surprise of the century to me. That's a good baseball player. I'm a little confused about that, but we're looking at, there are guys that are on roster bubbles that would probably be upgrades over Jake Cave. And I think you probably will see the Phillies go after one of those guys on a waiver claim basis, or maybe just a cash considerations trade basis. But I would say, keep an eye out for that. I don't know if Jake Cave is going to make the opening day roster. He might if those roster bubbles don't work in the Phillies' favor, but that's one space where I think they might look to upgrade.
Yeah, I think if they would DFA Jake Cave, he might pass through waivers, and we
absolutely
keep a hold of him anyway. But
that's what the Phillies thought that's what the Orioles thought when the Phillies claimed him from them, right? He was guaranteed a higher than league minimum deal, and then they were like, oh, we'll throw him, stash him down in AAA, and then somebody claimed him, right? So you never know.
I think they wouldn't DFA him if they weren't willing to get rid of him, obviously.
Right.
But I think I haven't got to watch a lot of the spring training games, but I feel like every time I look at the box score, David Dahl's doing something. I don't know what's going on, but it seems
I'm relatively surprised by that. I was an advocate for the Phillies taking a flyer on David Dahl a year or two ago. This year I was like, oh yeah, I remember. We're remembering some guys today. But I really I have also been impressed with Dahl's, at least his plays at the plate. I'm not sure if he's going to do enough. Remember, he's on an outright minor league deal. I'm not sure if he's going to do enough in camp to justify rostering him over Jake Cave. Obviously he's not on the 40-man at the moment and all those implications. But could be. Any
Yeah.
competition for Jake Cave is welcome competition, in my opinion. It's not that, and let me just say, it's not that I have anything against Jake Cave. I think Jake Cave is an unbelievable baseball player when the games don't matter. and that is there's something to be said for that. But I think that extra little skosh of pressure turns him from a guy with some free swinging tendencies into a really, really, really free swinger. And I think that's a hamartia of his. And if that means that, he is relegated to quad A purgatory, maybe that's just what it means. But, I wouldn't be mad if Jake Cave made the opening day roster, right? I wouldn't be.
Sure.
But I do think that they will be searching actively for upgrades.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And to your point, I mean, there were so many games where I can remember where it was 8-2 or 10-2, and Jake Cave hits a 3-run bomb. I mean, the only time of note I think that he did something in a pressure situation was the Williamsport game where it was 4-1, and I think he made it 4-3 with the 2-run bomb, but still not enough at the end of the day, right? And yeah, I mean, I don't, like you said, I don't have anything against Jake Cave, but it's just after seeing what happened last year, and I was there when he got thrown out at third base trying to get a triple in the NLCS game too. I kind of have had enough of it. And I just kind of want something, it's just, you want something different, especially with the bench guys.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think that's probably a good point to move on from at this point, right?
Yeah, I think
kind of beating the dead horse.
That's enough. Poor Jake.
Speaking of like in NRIs like David Dahl or whatever it may be, prospects. One I really wanted to talk to you about is Eduardo Tate or Tahit. I don't know how you say it.
Tate.
But,
Yep.
I know you're really high on him, so I wanted to hear your opinions.
I mean, who isn't at this point?
Yeah.
It's very exciting to be somebody invested in the Phillies farm system right now. I think that and listen, they're facing the same issue that they're going to face until we're about 2 or 3 years into the future, which is they are facing now the ramifications of not having second and third round picks for 5 years in a row or so. It happens, right? But they are kind of that lack of depth is kind of catching up to them a little bit. But the picks that they have had and the signings that they have had, they've made them count. You look at guys like Brian Rincon, you look at guys like Eduardo Tate, you look at guys that are kind of coming out of the woodwork and just making real names for themselves. I mean, there was a huge spike for somebody like Christian McGowan as soon as he became healthy, and we're looking at like a 7th round pick, right? There's so many interesting stories in the Phillies minor league system right now, and I feel like all the attention goes to, the Andrew Painters, the Nick Abels, the Aiden Millers, people like that, as is to be expected. But like, we are just very easily glazing over somebody like Starlin Caba, who, by all intents and purposes, looks to have the best hit tool of virtually any Phillies prospect I've seen in quite some time. Also, the work ethic that you simply can't teach. Brian Rincon is an incredible defender. I don't know, Drew, I know you haven't gotten to watch many of the games, but I don't know if either of you got to see Brian Rincon was a defensive sub for maybe 2 innings like a week ago. And the ball found him twice, and he just silky smooth. You look at somebody like William Bergola, who has probably the best eye of any Phillies prospect I've covered in ever. I mean, that guy knows the strike zone better than a 36-year-old grizzled veteran. He is relative. There are so many. There are clips that I get sent of him from various people because they have strike zone challenges. Down in the minor leagues at this point. The guy will watch a ball into the glove and it'll be called a strike, and just without checking in with anybody, he'll just tap his helmet and immediately. I think he had a 100% hit rate on missed calls last season. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. He knows the strike zone better than anyone I've ever seen. Truly, any minor leaguer I've ever seen, I should qualify.
Yeah,
but, sure.
Speaking of that, that's a great tool, that challenge system for the hitters. That is great.
Love it.
I think it's coming soon. Definitely.
I do too. I hope because you're not getting robo-umps. It's not happening.
Yeah.
So I think a strike zone challenge, maybe 2 or 3 a game, is a good meet in the middle there. But you've got so many exciting prospects. I've seen one guy that I have seen placed out of anywhere that I thought that he would be. I have Devin Saltivon ranked around 15, 16 in the system. MLB.com, or Pipeline, I should say, came out the other day very easily the high man on Devin Saltivon with, I think they ranked him 7th. Now, everyone that knows me knows I hate Pipeline. I always will. I think it's very lazy content. But if they know something that I don't about Devin Saltivon, that is a bold claim to make. That's a bold flag to stake in the ground. And I've since reached out to some people and have heard there are other high men on Devin Saltivon, but that is a really exciting thing. The only thing that I can really think of that would really intrigue somebody to the point of ranking him 7th in the system, there are definitely some people out there that think he could stick at shortstop, which would be pretty valuable. And on top of that, the hit tool, very real, speed is solid. The power is still a little bit of a question mark, but he's definitely a launch angle merchant. So I think we will definitely we'll find out a lot about a lot of guys this year. You look at the Griff McGarrys, you look at the guys that just have question marks next to their name, but the top 8 prospects in the system are a stronger group than I have seen from the Phillies in a long time, and that is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see Tate and why am I blanking? They're coming over from the Dominican Republic.
Caba.
Caba. Yeah. They're both going to be playing in A-ball this year, so
they sure are.
I'm definitely excited to see what they can do.
Yep,
because they're going to be facing older competition.
Well, A-ball and high A are going to be among the more exciting years of prospects that we've seen. I mean, you've got Rincon manning shortstop in high A. Tate obviously coming over for A-ball. You've got Caba, who's probably going to come over for A-ball. Bergola is probably going to stick in either A, maybe make the jump to high A and play second base. We'll see. Aiden Miller at third base, probably he won't stay in A-ball for long. Let's just be honest. You've got somebody like Justin Crawford, who is probably on the trajectory to be at AA at some point, next year. I mean, it's exciting. It is really exciting getting to watch these guys come up. And then, you look at the Gabriel Rincones of the world, who I love his athleticism. I have no idea what to make of most of the other tools. He's a very confusing guy to evaluate. But one thing I can say is he is definitely an athlete, and he definitely has some power, and that's exciting. You look at Carlos De La Cruz. Is it real? I have no idea. But it is very. It's just exciting. Everything's exciting in the Philly system right now, and it's really fun. They are missing lots of depth in the upper minors, but who cares?
It's coming. Yeah. Reinforcements are coming.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you already had Clearwater was one of the best teams in all the minor leagues last year, and now some of those guys are going up to Jersey Shore. And then, like we just talked about, you're having these guys like Caba and Tate who are going to go up to low A and playing Clearwater. So they're still going to be one of the better teams in the minors next year. And back to your point about Saltivon too, certainly wouldn't mind another flying Hawaiian, but I certainly thought when they drafted both him and Walton, I thought Walton was going to be the one who would make somewhat of a jump this year. That's too.
Where I am too.
So it's very interesting to see that Saltivon is ranked as high as he is on Pipeline right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know if it's, again, a they know something that we don't kind of scenario, but TJ Walton is definitely also a guy to watch, right? But to your point, records in minor league teams aren't necessarily something that you want to really champion as like a statistic, but it is a sign of general organizational strength when these guys are playing up again. And it becomes less so when you get to AAA and AA, because then you have veteran major leaguers, getting some playing time here or there. But when it comes to your high A and your low A, or excuse me, single A, teams and evaluating their records, that's an all prospect club, right? So it does kind of speak to the strength of the general lower part of the organization. And obviously, these are guys that in the next 2 years are going to be making their way through the system and making their way to AA, AAA. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Phillies now bring in a new crop of guys over these next 2 years as these other, groups of guys kind of make their way up, how those guys transition, how we evaluate those further draft classes. But as of right now, I'm really, really pleased with where this new regime has kind of landed this system. I think Brian Barber's done a wonderful job leading up scouting. I think Preston Mattingly has done an incredible job. He just seems to be the talk of the town of late, as do ads like Annie Colombi, right? Like we are seeing the Phillies turn lots of, it seems to be every year one non-roster invitee kind of comes out of nowhere and really impresses. And, the year prior to last, it was Andrew Bellotto. Last year, it was Jeff Hoffman. Guys just kind of come out of nowhere at this point in this organization. And it is a very, very welcome change to what I think Phillies fans had become accustomed to.
Yeah,
sure.
I think the higher level minors and major league pitching development is just on another planet from a lot of other organizations right now.
Caleb Cotham needs to be built a statue. He is easily the most valuable human being in the organization right now. He is.
He's incredible.
He is a wow. Wow. Just based off of what I've heard, what I've read, what I've seen, who I've talked to, these things, the man can do no wrong in my book.
Yeah,
right.
He's doing everything right at this point. I mean, he has very few failed projects.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned 4 guys who are probably all on the High Hopes podcast, Mount Rushmore for the Phillies development. And hopefully add in Dustin Lin this year too, who's coming over to hopefully reduce the chase rate as well in the lineup.
We'll see. I'm excited, but I think that just you can't really point to a single. I can't say this much. This is probably a bit too rah from me. But there have not been a lot of missteps that the Phillies have made organizationally of late. It seems like everybody they've brought in has, in one way or another, impacted the organization positively. I mean, obviously, we look at Kevin Long, we look at Caleb Cotham, we look at all these new front office hires. Sam Fold is just a beloved person, and I see a lot of people say, "What does Sam Fold do exactly?" And Sam Fold's job is to be an envoy between Dave Dombrowski and the players at this point. And eventually, he will be the Dave Dombrowski of the Phillies organization when Dave decides to hang him up, as it were. And everything that I've heard about Sam is just outstanding. And you would expect that from a guy who was universally beloved in his clubhouses over his time playing and yada, yada, yada. But it just feels like the Phillies org is a really nice place to be right now. Feels like the vibes are high and everything is kind of clicking departmentally, which is fun.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And to kind of stick in the organization too, I think Thompson just announced that McGarry will start in the bullpen in AAA this year. And obviously behind Abel and Painter, there is a bit of a gap and a drop off in pitching development right now. What are kind of your thoughts on some of the guys that could make their way up there and fill that role, and also on McGarry and the transition he's making? I think me and Drew kind of are on the standpoint that is definitely the best move for him. We were kind of speculating that might happen this year.
Yeah, I think that at this point, and I think it was Matt Gelb who wrote a really great piece on McGarry and the adjustments that he had made and how they got to this point with him. And the end all be all is they really didn't adjust a lot for him when he first came into the organization. And I don't necessarily blame them because the stuff was getting results, right? And that jump from double to AAA is a real wake-up call. You are facing vets, you're facing guys that are trying to claw their way back to the majors. It's a real, it's a hard wall to hit. And so all of a sudden you go from being this absolutely unstoppable force to none of your stuff is landing in the strike zone and nobody's swinging at it. And it's a real wake-up call. Yeah. So, I think now that they have kind of approached Griff with these adjustments, Griff has taken them on and taken them in stride. What I will say is the arm action looks totally different. And a lot of his movement, a lot of the extraneous movement in his delivery has been cut out, which I love. You are more guaranteed to get repeatability from those adjustments by working an inning by inning basis instead of throwing him out there and letting him tire and letting him, just face multiple innings worth of batters at a time. You're much more likely to lock in those results out of the bullpen. You see that with guys that transition to the major leagues all the time. Spencer Strider started in the bullpen, right? AJ Smith-Shawver was going to start out of the bullpen, and then the Braves had a couple injuries, and so he kind of made his way to the rotation. Those are just Braves examples. But, you see that from the Brewers especially all the time. The Brewers did that with Drew Rasmussen. The Brewers did that with Colin Ray. The Brewers do that with like 99% of the guys that they bring into their rotation, right? So it really, it's a very common thing to do to kind of help a guy transition to a new role or to, make adjustments into new mechanics by placing them in the bullpen, working them with them inning by inning or in low pressure scenarios for multiple innings. I think if you are overreacting to this, you're being silly. Just because a pitcher is placed in the bullpen. I think I tweeted this, but pitchers' paths are not all linear, right? We are not looking at, this being a permanent move. And maybe it is. Maybe he finds incredible success here, and this is where Griff McGarry sticks. I mean, it is his floor, proverbially, right? He will be an absolutely filthy arm out of the bullpen, if nothing else. But I think that this move is absolutely the right way to go with Griff, just in terms of being able to really lock in these adjustments and getting him used to operating out of, operating out of the bullpen. This is also where he's going to help the team most in the short term, right? Yeah. You're not looking at calling upon him as a starter this year, right? But down the line, maybe you're looking at him at calling him up out of the bullpen later this season, right? Yep. If he adjusts well, that's where he's going to make a difference, not in the rotation. The Phillies have that covered at this point. As you can see by the swath of starting pitchers they brought in Spencer Turnbull, Colby Allard, the Max Castillo, the list goes on. So I think that it's absolutely the right place for him to be right now. And just because he's there now doesn't mean that's where he will stay.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be something that it definitely sticks for this season. And if he has success there, he's going to be in the major leagues probably before the September roster expansion, I would assume. And he's going to be able to help the major league club this year if he has success there.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and on that, I want to ask you about Abel too. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he's looked really awesome in spring training so far. I think there were some people who were on the standpoint that he might have been plateauing a little bit. And I know that was some of the Phillies' thoughts around Twitter I saw flying around. But I remember listening. Speaking of high hopes again, I was listening to them talk to. I think it was either Barber or Mattingly who was on there.
Probably Mattingly.
And they talked to him about Abel. And I kind of had like a new infused confidence in him going into this season, and to see what he has done in spring. Obviously, it is spring, but then to see him throw that changeup versus Juan Soto and then get him on high heat, stuff like that is really cool to see in spring. And it's so fun to watch what Abel's doing right now.
I think a lot of people that have gripes about Mick Abel forget that he's 22 years old and just pitched a full season in Double-A ball. I think that if you're going to complain about a 22-year-old, facing struggles against major league hitters or former major league hitters, be my guest. But not every player is going to be Juan Soto and come up and succeed at 18 years old, right? There are like virtually zero pitchers that come up and succeed at 18, 19, 20, 21 ish is where we start getting into, the anomalies of the world, as it were. And again, not to, hype up any Braves prospect, but AJ Smith-Shawver, right? 21-year-old kid comes up to the majors, immediately struggles, is going to start the year in AAA this year. You can't rush these guys, right? And the fact that we're even talking about struggles when I think Mick posted like a 4.3 ERA in AA last year. Can we really complain? I mean, it really it's very frustrating, especially when these guys, when they're on a development path, they're asked to do certain things, right?
Yeah.
If they say go out and throw purely fastballs today, they got to do it, right? It's the game plan. And they did that with Mick a lot to really help him hone his fastball command. They did the same thing with Andrew Painter, and it just turned into an absolute rocket ship to the major leagues. But I mean, everybody's path is different, and not every path is linear, right? But I think that that's why people tend to think that Mick is plateauing, because Andrew was obviously drafted later and then kind of vaulted him a little bit. But this is still a guy that drew comparisons to Justin Verlander in his respective draft, right? This is a guy that you want to just watch grow and take as much time as he needs, because when he gets to the majors, you want to make sure that he is ready to go. And that's, again, why I don't see where people go so bazooka about, the Phillies not signing Jordan Montgomery or Blake Snell and trading Taijuan Walker. You have better Jordan Montgomery and or Blake Snell in your system right now, in Andrew Painter, in Mick Abel, right? You have these guys that you are going to need to lean on in future years and that are going to need a spot, right? They're not going anywhere as far as things currently stand. And they are incredibly, incredibly talented human beings. And that's what, makes me so excited about both of them. And obviously Andrew is healing now, but all eyes are on Mick at this point. And I think that's why people are expecting a little bit more. But I also think that this year is going to be hugely pivotal for him. He is going to get a lot of time to really work out the kinks. Obviously spring has been a really early encouraging sign. It also kind of brings to light why somebody like, not to name names, but somebody that writes for The Athletic that makes their prospect lists, why that person is just so out of the loop, I guess, because when you write that Mick Abel is sitting 92, 94 on the fastball, and then Mick Abel's first performance of the spring, he's sitting 96, 97, well, you start to look a little stupid. And then you see how he strikes out probably the most disciplined hitter in all of major leagues, the best hitter probably in all of the major leagues. And you kind of just say, well, maybe we start looking a little silly, and like we don't know what we're talking about. So all in all, it's going to be a really exciting year for him. It's going to be a really exciting year from a pitching perspective for a lot of Phillies prospects. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this depth chart, as it were, shakes out following the draft, and then also following, the full season of minor league baseball.
Yeah. I think Mick, like, I'm kind of like, I don't know what to say about our rotation, because everybody's under contract through 2027. Even Taijuan's contract, I believe, is up that year, and so is maybe Rangers a free agent in 2028.
Rangers a free agent in 2 years, and then Taijuan is a free agent in also 2 years following this year. So I guess that would be 2027.
Yeah, I think we have two guys leaving. Two guys leaving in 2027.
So, right. I mean, this is going to get me into another tangent of just, I don't understand why we're going to complain about a guy that tossed 170 innings of 4.2 ERA ball.
Yeah.
But it seems that Phillies fans are just really trying to find something to complain about when things are as good as they've been for so long. Obviously, you'd like to win it all, but you got to find something to help you sleep at night, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the only gripe a lot of people had with Taijuan last year was not pitching in the playoffs and not earning that spot in the playoffs.
I think it was just inconsistency. I think that, inconsistency is frustrating. It's why Phillies fans were so frustrated with Rhys Hoskins. It's why Phillies fans get so frustrated with Aaron Nola, even though that man is the probably pinnacle of consistency in terms of how constantly he will give you 6 to 7 innings and keep you in the game. He never gets blown out ever.
Yeah.
So,
No.
I mean, yeah, inconsistency can be frustrating, but
Yeah.
I think that you're probably looking at a guy in Taiwan who was dealing with something last year. Dealing
your
with
velo doesn't just drop like that.
And on top of that, I think that the constant, something was going on with the forearm, something was going on with the hamstring, and then the constant saying, "No, I'm fine," constant saying, everything's good. Taiwan's not the kind of guy that is, and I only know this from speaking to him maybe once or twice, and then having people close to the Mets from when he was there talking to them. He's not the kind of guy that's going to come out and make excuses. That's just not who he is. He's going to say what he means, and he was obviously not happy with not pitching in the playoffs last season. But this has been made, abundantly clear. The beef has been squashed, or whatever he was feeling, right? And now he's ready to go prove that, he's going to pitch in the playoffs this year, right?
Yep.
So let it happen. Why would you not root for the guy instead of saying, get this guy off my team, give me somebody who may or may not be worse?
Yeah, and I mean, you see the kind of money Zach Wheeler just got. I mean, the pitching market is it's so inflated right now. I mean, a starting pitcher giving you 170 innings, making $20 million a year, you can't really complain.
Kyle Gibson got $13 million this season.
Exactly. Yes.
Would you rather have Kyle Gibson for 1 year and then continuously sign back Kyle Gibson, or pay $4 million extra and have Taijuan Walker for a little bit longer?
Exactly.
With maybe some semblance of upside and the same amount of durability.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I know which one I'm picking.
Yeah. I think people just don't realize how much good starting pitching really costs at the end of the day. I mean, Wheeler ultimately took less money to come back to Philly for the next 3 years because he probably could have got $50 million a year on the free agent market.
I think more so than that, he got shortchanged on years immensely. And I think that the high AAV helps offset that. But he said himself, he's not a guy that wants to pitch when he's old, right? Yeah. So, I mean, respect to him for wanting to stick around, but he left a ton of money on the floor.
Yeah. I mean, I'd hate to see him retire after that contract because, I mean, he is electric.
I think for as long as he's effective, I think he will probably – I think what you will see with Zach Wheeler is the same thing that you've seen with Charlie Morton in Atlanta, where as long as he's willing to come back, they're going to have him back. I just think that, I think the first year that he sees himself plateau a little bit, he'll probably say, okay, that's it.
Yep.
I'm done.
I'm happy. My work's done here. Yep. I totally agree with you.
And that's what Halladay did too. In 2012, he wasn't the same guy. He was hurt, and then he called it a career. And he went out having one of the best careers of a pitcher in recent history.
And these are both guys that probably could have kept parlaying themselves into deals until they were, 50. But they don't. For some guys, it's more about it's about more than just money. And Zach Wheeler is definitely that kind of guy.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the Phillies, it worked out for both sides at the end of the day with the Wheeler contract. It's a great contract, so I don't really have any concerns with it.
Nor do I.
Yeah. And sticking with the rotation, too, me and Drew have talked about this a lot this offseason. We are both very, very high on Christopher Sanchez going into this year. We love what we saw last year. A lot of the underlying numbers and advanced data is very encouraging on him, too. Even if he doesn't replicate it, we still think he can pitch to a very effective level this upcoming year. And I think he's more than a formidable number 5. I think he absolutely showed that last year. I mean, his changeup is one of the best pitches in baseball. How do you feel about him going into this year as your number 5 after years of seeing bullpen days, too?
I mean, the Phillies are so immeasurably lucky that Christopher Sanchez worked out last season. Because beyond Chris Sanchez, the depth was Nick Nelson, Noah Skiro, and that was about it. So the Phillies are pretty lucky. But I think that for a long time, I think there have been fans of Chris Sanchez's in the Phillies organization. He has just been long beloved by a bunch of folks just because he has a lot of really odd outlier traits that
Yeah.
kind of are. It's not the same thing at all. They are not even close to similar pitchers, but it's very Ranger Suarez-ian in that, you know, one year he's doing nothing. And is kind of meandering in the bullpen and trying to find a place. And the next year something clicks and he's a staple in the rotation. We have seen this happen before. And what's amazing about Chris Sanchez is that now that he's been guaranteed this spot, he's going to make the most out of it. He is a really, really great kid. But more than that, these outlier traits are what make him really special. Now, there's a whole bunch of talking going on, behind the scenes about if this velocity bump that we've seen from him is going to kind of mess with some of those outlier traits.
Sure.
It seems that they might, but I don't think that is as big a deal as some of us are making it seem. I think the way that the sinker and changeup tunnel are just going to be, enough to sustain him for. You're completely right, Hunter, in that the changeup is one of the better pitches on this staff as a whole. It is a really, really, really strong go-to secondary. And then the cutter taking a step forward command-wise is going to be a big deal because that allows him to really have, 3 pitches off the same plane and in a very similar velocity band too, that each tunnel in a different way, which is just, I'm so excited. He's really funky. I can't say that I have always been a Christopher Sanchez believer. I'd be lying if I said that. But seeing what we saw from him last season and seeing what I've seen from him this spring, and just looking at the makeup now and the confidence that he's leading with, I can pretty confidently say that Chris Sanchez is a more than suitable 5. And even then, I think you might be looking at a flip-flopping of 4 and 5. Obviously, not with Ranger pitching the day prior to whoever your number 4 is. But in terms of if we're ranking them by effectiveness, I think you're probably looking at Taijuan Walker is ranked at 5, whereas Chris Sanchez would be taking the leapfrog moment there. Yeah, I'm so excited to watch a full season of Chris Sanchez. I could not be more excited. And then you look at the depth that they have acquired from under him. If it doesn't work out and you do have to bump him to the bullpen for some, period of time, well, then luckily you've got a swath of guys just chilling in AAA, which is really, I think Dave Dombrowski did exceptionally well in terms of shoring up, the rotation depth wise. Worst case, there's a deadline.
Yep. Spencer Turnbull was a great signing in that sense.
What's crazy is that I had no idea what to expect when it came to Spencer Turnbull. No idea. I had heard some middling things about just early returns on Spencer Turnbull, and then he came out and threw probably the filthiest outing of any Phillies pitcher this spring, period, end of story. So I don't know what to make of it. The delivery looks like it's a bit of a mess, I guess. So, he could use some more repeatability, but
he'll have time to work that out.
You can't argue with what we saw on StatCast. I mean,
right.
That was nuts. It was a nuts outing. And then we haven't seen him since. So who's to say? But yeah, I think if you're going to get him to agree to bump to AAA for until you need him, it seems like $2 million well spent, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even if he gives you 50 quality innings, it's worth it.
And you complain, at least you don't have to part with, How You Lee at the deadline, right?
Right.
Like they did with acquiring Michael Lorenzen. So, and not that I think it's any huge loss that How You Lee is over with Detroit now, but it's going to save you a prospect. Right. Yeah. To just have that arm waiting in the wings. And sure, injuries can happen, but instead of going out and acquiring a middling starting pitcher, you have one waiting for you in AAA, which is great.
Yep. And then worst case, you get to see Mick Abel.
Who would complain in that scenario? Not me.
Nope, me neither.
Not me.
Right. And back to your point on Sanchez too. So I go to games here and there, but I was at his debut actually when the netting fell down behind home plate, which was just a wild experience being there for that. But to that point too, I was also in Fenway when Nola got scratched for COVID reasons, and Brandon Kinsler started the game. Of course, he gave up a home run in the first inning, but Christopher Sanchez follows him up with, I believe, 2 1/3, pitched very, very well. And just to that point, the point I'm trying to make is you look at those 2 games early on when he wasn't even what he is now. And I think he didn't get fazed by anything. I mean, those are 2 very weird circumstances. He's called up to Boston the day of. And I'm sure they had an idea of that at some point that day, or I don't know when, but it just feels like you said, he has that confidence in addition to the stuff right now. And I think that's a really big thing for him going into this year with that mentality too.
I think the confidence is also, it's newly founded
Yeah.
in that he has been given, it wasn't even a battle coming into spring. He is making the rotation. He is a staple in this Phillies rotation now. And knowing that as a player, and I'm sure it's the same for somebody like Johan Rojas to kind of bring us full circle here, knowing that as a player, the pressure immediately lifts. There's no more, you don't have to worry about anything anymore.
Yeah, you can actually work on things.
Well, you can work on things and you can just go out and play your game, which is, it's huge. The confidence is a major part of success. I don't care what industry you're in. If you're in, I don't know, analytics, finance, if you're in anything, right? If you're confident in your ability, it helps you perform better. That's just the end all be all of the thing, right? For baseball, it goes double, triple, quadruple, million times. Yeah. If you can be confident in your own ability and you just go out and get to play your game, you're going to succeed, right?
Yep.
Or then you retire.
I think Chris Sanchez definitely has the makings of a big game pitcher, kind of like Nolan Wheeler, and Ranger, obviously.
He really he reminds me. Well, we'll see. I don't think he has the same cold-bloodedness as Ranger Suarez, but just his path to the rotation. Obviously, the handedness helps, but his path to the rotation and just kind of how he found himself in this position, and the hopefully the confidence that comes along with it is very Ranger esque, and that's pretty cool. And very seldom that you find 2 pitchers of the same handedness that kind of come out of the woodwork like that and impress you so much that they're just given jobs off the bat. I think it's pretty cool and very rare.
Yeah. Like I said, I think I said it in one of our previous podcasts, but Chris Sanchez was like an afterthought last year. Everybody kind of forgot about him.
He's been an afterthought for some time. I mean, he was an afterthought after the Phillies traded Curtis Mead for him because Curtis Mead became, Jesus, apparently. Australian Jesus. And now, I don't know if we're done evaluating that trade. I don't know if we are done evaluating that trade.
Mead's on the brink of the MLB, right? He's close.
I think he might crack camp with the Rays. I doubt it, but he might. And he's really, don't get me wrong, incredible hitter, still positionless, but incredible hitter. I just think that if Chris Sanchez is really Chris Sanchez, what would you rather have? A positionless right-handed bat or a really, really, really adept left-handed pitcher in your rotation?
Yeah. I mean, Ranger and Chris are like a nightmare for left-handed hitters. Like, it's brutal. I mean, if you're facing a team that has
Christopher Sanchez is even more of a nightmare. I mean, Ranger's going to bust in on your hands, but that sinker's running in on you all the time. That changeup is unhittable if you're a left-handed hitter.
And then you said about the cutter as well, and that's going to run in on right-handers now.
And even away on lefties. If he can locate that down and away against lefties, I mean, how do you hit him? I don't think you can. It is double the nightmare which is huge in the NL East, by the way. Lots of fearsome left-handed hitters, and especially when you look at playoff teams. You look at the Astros, you look at Yordan Alvarez, right? You look at Kyle Tucker, you look at some of those guys, and you say, well, if I really need a tough left-handed at bat, I know who I'm going to.
Yeah, and you can get one of them out of the bullpen in the playoffs, which is incredible.
Yeah, and Alvarado to follow up too. You need him for another lefty.
Which is mean. And Greg Soto, who's had a really great camp, who I have no idea how those statistics were as bad as they were last year.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do?
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot in recent weeks too with Soto. Obviously, his first outing or two in spring was not great, but recently he's been much better in spring. And Yeah, you look at a lot of the underlying numbers with him last year too, and it's what happened. I mean, it's just a big question mark because it just didn't seem like things lined up the way they were supposed to for him. And I felt like he got unlucky a number of times last year too. And I think at the least, he's a guy who can pitch against lefties in the playoffs. And you saw that he got in game 4 when we were closing it out. He got the one out to end the 8th and obviously gives up 2 singles after that. But then you have Strom following up, another lefty who, with Strom, it feels like it's not really even, it doesn't matter what lefty righty. I mean, that guy can get both of them.
Yep. He's really good. That is a very low-key extension candidate that I would like to see the Phillies peruse some opportunities there. I think Matt Strom, if you can couple him with a right-handed multi-inning guy, something like a Spencer Turnbull, something like maybe a Griff McGarry or somebody of that, ilk. I mean, Matt Strom has been a revelation. Really helped the Phillies bullpen last year and really didn't get a lot of praise sung for him, but definitely deserves it. Again, I feel like the Phillies have mostly hit here. I feel like, a lot of the free agent signings of late, I feel like a lot of the organizational ads, I feel like everybody's kind of on the same page, and that makes good things happen.
Yeah. Yep, I totally agree. Matt Strom's K rate went sky high last year compared to what it was in the past.
Another ridiculously difficult at bat, though. I mean, all of that stuff coming from the left side, the fastball, the cutter, and the slider, you cannot tell which one's coming at you. Yep. It is a really uncomfy at bat, really uncomfy. And that with his funk and his delivery, and then, just the ability for him to go multiple innings is just not. It's very it's not common. It's not common, and that is a really great trait that the Phillies were able to identify really, really early. And everybody was like, "You're giving Matt Strom $16 million?"
Yeah, everybody was like scratching their head.
Well, it was pretty worth it.
I mean, he was a good starting pitcher last year.
Yes,
I mean, he gave us like what he pitched last year, almost 100 innings, like 80.
Something like that. I think it was more than he'd pitched in years.
Yeah.
I'll look it up for you guys, but it's
probably since his time in San Diego, I would guess was the last time he threw that much.
87.2. The last time he threw anything close to that was 114 in 2019.
Yeah. I mean, he looked really good doing it. He didn't show any signs of fatigue, even.
They did have moments where he definitely was fatiguing a little bit, but they just dropped his usage. They backed him right off. And he just, he regenerated by the playoffs and was outstanding.
One thing he has that you can't teach is balls. I mean, he goes out there and he attacks whoever he's facing. He doesn't care.
That's the Phillies organizational, that is their motto is, and it's apparently the Rays too, which surprise, but it's trust your stuff, go out there, throw strikes, right? Strike one, strike two, good luck. That's it. And it really, again, it's a confidence thing, right? Yep. If you trust your stuff and you have confidence in what you're throwing, it's up to the hitters to beat you. And more times than not, you're going to beat a guy on a 101 mile an hour fastball, or even, a filthy, disgusting high spin slider. That, even if you're leaving it in the middle of the box, they still got to put a bat on it.
Not to bring up nightmares, but it's kind of like when Alvarado gave up that home run to Alvarez in Game 6. I mean, you just got to tip your cap. Yeah, you just got to tip your cap. You can only go to the well so many times.
It happens.
It's going to be dry eventually.
When it's easier to say when you're facing a generational hitter, right. But most of the time you're winning that battle. And unfortunately, sometimes it's those most important moments where you have so much confidence and then things happen. But
I mean, Alvarado beat him every time up to that point.
Yep.
I think.
So
and I think you faced him every single game in that series.
He sure did.
So you can only let him see him so many times, and it's just unfortunate.
Speaking of balls and stuff plus and all that type of stuff too, I want to talk about Hoffman a little bit as well. He's honestly my personal favorite in the bullpen right now, and also I think an extension candidate depending upon how this year plays out.
No doubt.
That guy, again, just came out of nowhere last year. He's got 3 pitches that all play very beautifully.
Yeah.
And I feel like there was a little bit of an overreaction after the Austin Riley home run from the fan base. I felt like that's something that is not going to happen every single time. And I think it's an opportunity, or it's an at bat where he did end up muscling that one out. And I think Hoffman did throw his best pitch. I think if you could go back and make another decision on that, you probably go high fastball there based off of how we had pitched them in that series. But regardless, I think that's more of an outlier than the norm with Hoffman. I think he's been very, very effective it was very, very effective up to that point. One of our better bullpen guys in the back half of the season too. So I wasn't necessarily, I don't think the Phillies moved off of him, and they used him in pretty important spots the rest of the postseason. And you can argue, third, fourth inning, but those were still important spots where there were runners on base. But I personally wasn't really moved off of him by that, as some of the fan base seemed to be.
Yeah, I think, again, he's a guy that he, up to that point, hadn't pitched that many innings Jeff Hoffman had been hurt for years and years and years. I just remember in his time with the Rockies, he just could not stay healthy. He was a guy that everybody was so excited about all the time, and then he would get hurt, right? When he transitioned to the Reds, again, he got hurt when the Reds were they took a real interest in him. I think who did they trade to the Rockies for him before arbitration hearings 2 years ago? Can't remember. Anyway, he's a guy that had not pitched that many innings, and even past that had never worked out of the bullpen. So it was a transition year for him in general, and for the Phillies to have that much faith in him, but also for him to kind of show up in so many big moments. You can't fault the guy. And I think maybe we're seeing a little bit of a slow start from him this spring, just in terms of where the velocity is and all those things, to be expected. Again, he's probably still recovering from a heavy workload and lots of high pressure innings. But I mean, again, that's another guy you look at and you say, wow, this bullpen is pretty good. If Seranthony Dominguez kind of returns to form a little bit more, which again, another guy that was healing. If Jeff Hoffman continues to take steps forward, if Orion Kerkering just keeps being Orion Kerkering, I mean, having a slider that is 40% better than an average major league pitch is kind of crazy. So, being able to, trust those guys and really look at that unit and say, yeah, there's really not a lot of room to breathe in this bullpen here, is exciting. And I think Jeff Hoffman is, fans are always going to overreact and remember the big moments, but I think we're also probably forgetting how many moments he came up massively, especially during the regular season. He's a great pitcher. He's been a great addition. And I think the only reason that you're not seeing him get extended here is because he has struggled with injuries. And this is more of a workload than he has had. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Jeff Hoffman has this season. And I'm even more looking forward to messing up his name and conflating him with Trevor Hoffman a million more times, like I have tended to do forever. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Just
go ahead.
Robert Stevenson trade was what it was that you were.
Well, now we see why that happened as well. So,
Just like a quick little caveat from the Austin Riley home run last year. It's very reminiscent of Robert Suarez's home run he gave up to Bryce Harper.
Right.
He didn't give up a home run to a lefty
Robert Suarez
all year.
Was unhittable. He was unhittable to that point.
Especially against lefties. Didn't give up a home run all year.
Yep.
And then Bryce Harper takes him deep in the biggest spot in the season.
Right.
Just is what it is.
You got beat.
Yep. And then we kind of wanted to talk about concerns as far as different parts of the team go. Mm-hmm. Do you have any concerns with any of the guys in the bullpen? My biggest concern personally is kind of Kerkering taking a faceplant and them not having that other option.
I hear you. I think that in general, the Phillies have turned water to wine so many times, and have somebody like Andrew Bellotti in the wings should something go wrong. I mean, he's not on the 40-man, right? Right now, the roster, you're probably saying goodbye to Connor Brogdon, which, or we'll see, I guess. But, I'm pretty sure he's probably going to pass through waivers at this point. That being said, probably free agency next year. But you're probably saying goodbye to Connor Brogdon at this point. And then you're looking at adding Junior Marte and Luis Ortiz, right? Or one of those two guys, Jose Ruiz is around, and all those things. I think every single option that you have in the bullpen is so dependable at this point that if Kerkering does kind of faceplant a little bit, as you said, which he won't, the stuff is undeniable and the command is very good. I mean, even if he faceplants at the start of the season, I can't see them moving him from the bullpen at any point. I think the confidence really shows, that he was told outright he's making the team, right? Like he was just like, you have a spot. Like that's what's happening. It is hard to see him faltering from where he is. So I think he'll be fine, but I do understand the concern. I think the Phillies' depth is just good enough to make up for it. And even if it's not, again, there's always a deadline, right? And I think that your back end of your bullpen's so good that, if that means that you maybe ask your starters to give you a little bit more every now and again, sure, it is what it is, right? In terms of anywhere else that's the thing. There are all these plans in place, these just in case maneuvers that have been taken. And the signing of Whit Merrifield is a big part of that. But if Rojas does not work out, you've got something to fall back on. If I don't know, Schwarber or Castellanos or anybody struggles, well, listen, again, there's a trade deadline, but at this point, I don't foresee that happening. That's why it's so scary to be a Phillies fan right now, is because I've been lured into this sense of security that I feel like I've never really had with this team before. And it's very cool to look at a roster and have most of your questions answered. So, that's not something that Phillies fans have been entirely accustomed to over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't me saying I think Kerkering's
No, I hear you.
It's just one of my worries. Like, I didn't quite understand what they would do.
It's what if, but at this point, they have a farm system that they can fire bullets from if they need to, make some sort of big trade. They've got space before the third luxury tax threshold, and they've got guys on the bench that are more than suitable everyday players should they need them in multiple positions. So I don't think you can complain at this point.
Speaking of the third tax threshold, I think you're kind of on the same page as I am, but I think they're going to stay under it this year. And then this next offseason, it's free game. Like, they're going to go way past it.
Blow through it.
It is the one thing, and I'm actually glad you asked this, because it's the one thing that I have been meaning to go on a rant on, and I just can't put it on Twitter, and I'll keep it brief. But the one thing that I've said since Matt Klentak started structuring this payroll. Listen, I'm never gonna hand it to him. I'm not. I think he made a lot of mistakes, but the one thing that he always did incredibly well was manage the payroll. This payroll is structured in a way where, yes, you have Bryce Harper and Trey Turner taking up, $50 million or so over the next 11 years. Yeah, or not 11. Bryce has 8 years left. But if there's an extension, right, 10 years-ish. But that $50 million in 10 years after inflation and after all those things is going to look like a pittance, right? If this year has proven anything, right, it's going to look like nothing.
Bryce's contract is already a bargain.
Well, yeah, pretty much. But at this point going forward, right, you start looking at what exactly the payroll starts to look like in a couple of years, and they're already projected to go over next year. So, after additional arbitration and all those things. If they're already going to be there, I can't see them not just spending whatever the hell they want to spend. And then the year following, Taijuan Walker falls off the payroll. Kyle Schwarber falls off the payroll. JT Realmuto falls off the payroll. The year following that, Taijuan Walker falls off the payroll. Nick Castellanos falls off the payroll. This payroll is structured in a way where, yes, their window is now, but then a new window presents itself with all the prospects that you're calling upon, and then all the money that you have freeing itself up. It's why I really don't know if the Phillies should be counted out on Juan Soto next year. Now, granted, I think he's winning AL MVP, and I think that he is I don't know. I think everybody and their mother is going to be interested. But I think that at this point, if they have what is it, a combined 20 or 45 million falling off after Real Muto and Schwarber, and then even more, when you look at arbitration guys that or anything of the sort, team options that might not be picked up, things like that. I don't see why they couldn't afford somebody like Juan Soto for 50 million a year. And yes, you might say, well, then he has to play in the outfield. Well, yeah, I mean, probably, but that's ideally, he's 24 years old. That's ideally where he would probably play anyway.
Yeah.
That, again, kind of bears repeating. He's 24 years old, Juan Soto. 24 years old.
That's insane.
That's nuts.
He's probably still going to get a 10-plus year contract.
He's going to get like a 15-year.
Yeah.
I think he is going to, wherever he goes, he's going to get locked up for the remainder of his career. Yep. And he is that good. He's probably going to, I don't think he'll beat Shohei Ohtani's figure in terms of what he made overall, but he's probably going to beat Shohei's AAV. And the Phillies, next year, if they go, full bore all the way over the luxury tax by a bajillion dollars and have to pay some huge Cohen tax number, whatever. But then you have 45 million falling off the books in 2026 with JT Realmuto and Kyle Schwarber. And Kyle Schwarber falls off the payroll. You need an outfielder. It kind of makes sense. So I feel like it is something that is definitely not to be counted out from. That being said, it probably doesn't happen. But they probably add a ton of guys on 1-year deals, right? Yep. They probably add a bunch of bullpen insurance, right? They probably add a bunch of, exactly what they did this year. In picking up somebody like Whit Merrifield, they probably, add to the bench. I don't think Edmundo Sosa probably gets paid his ARB 3 figure next year. Maybe he gets traded. Maybe he gets non-tendered, whatever. But the bench is looking at some significant turnover. There's a whole lot to look at next year and years following. But I'm completely with you. I think that this payroll is structured in a way where it just makes sense to go fully balls to the wall with payroll next year, as long as you can then fall right back under the tax the next year, no matter what additions you made.
Yeah. And that's kind of the reason I thought they were going to want to keep all their picks this year, because you lose that first round pick back 10 spots like the Mets did.
I mean, but that's not even, if they are projected to make a long run this year, there's not a huge difference between, picking 28th and picking 38th, right? The high school guys that are going to get huge signing bonuses are still going to be there, right?
And that's what the Phillies have liked.
Well, and it's what you saw with Aiden Miller, right? Nobody ever could have thought that Aiden Miller would make it to 27, right? Yeah. Nobody ever would have imagined, but it happened, right? The Mets got Houck. What is his name?
Tanner Houck?
No, not Tanner Houck. He's a Boston Red Sox pitcher. The shortstop. They might be related.
Let me look really quick.
But the Mets got Houck in the second round, or after their pick got pushed back 10 spots. They drafted that guy who was projected to go. Colin Houck, thank you. Who's projected to go top 15, right? Those guys are still going to be there. They stick around, right? So in the grand scheme of things, if they are picking 28th or 38th, that doesn't necessarily matter. Now they'll probably lose their 2nd and 5th round pick again, because they're going to sign somebody with a qualifying offer, right? But at that point, you're trying to contend. You're trying to win now. Why does that matter? Especially if the next year you're just looking to fall right back under.
Yeah, and if they win it this year, if they win the World Series this year, it's just going to be icing on the cake, because they're going to blow past that threshold and
just get better.
Go for it again next year.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you look at guys like local kids too. Ant Solomito, he ends up falling to 37 a year or two ago, and Nolan Jones, they weren't sure if he was going to play college ball or not.
Thomas White fell to 40 something. The Marlins either competitive round pick or second round pick. Thomas White, who is projected to be probably one of the best left-handed pitching prospects in all of baseball this year, fell to the second round to 40 something, right? It happens. So it's not that big of a change when you're already picking so late.
Yeah,
Sure.
and the way the Phillies have been drafting lately, losing those couple picks, it isn't a huge deal because pretty much all of their picks, it seems like, have been working out, like to some
Yeah,
extent.
they're hitting a lot.
Yeah,
I have my
especially in the late
own.
round.
I have my own gripes with Justin Crawford and the overhyping and
Right.
all these things. I'm
Yeah.
not hugely high. I'm not hugely low, but I'm not hugely high on Justin Crawford at this very moment in time.
Right, same.
But it's they
If he
are
elevates the ball,
they're doing well.
Yeah.
Brian Rincon was a 6th, 7th round pick.
Yeah.
They have found gems late in Griff McGarry was a 5th round pick. That's the one that I'm always going to use just because
Kirkering.
Griff was crazy. Yeah, Kirkering was a 7th round pick.
Right.
8th round pick. Like
he was late.
It's
Right.
They have done really, really well. And far be it from me to complain that my team is spending money when the Marlins constantly try to fight on being under a $100 million payroll and could be so great. If the Marlins would spend money, the Marlins would be unstoppable.
Yuri Perez is a special pitcher.
They have like 12 special pitchers.
Yeah,
Edward Cabrera is a special pitcher.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand. Like look at what Trevor Rogers was able to do when he was healthy. Like they are the best. I constantly will herald the Marlins. You can say the Guardians. The Guardians are pretty freaking amazing. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
You can say the Guardians. You can say the Reds. You can say the whatever. I will constantly stand by them. Marlins make something out of nothing more often than not. And if they would just spend money and up their hitting development and their hitting analysis, they'd be unstoppable. And they just refuse, which is so unfortunate. But I'm always on the Fish on First guys podcast. They asked me back a lot, and I love them over there. But I constantly tell them that if their team would spend money, they would probably in the next 4 or 5 years win the NL East. But they just refuse to do it, unfortunately.
Do you think?
Go for it. You go for it.
I was going to kind of go back to the luxury tax talk of next year. Do you think Sasaki is someone who's also in play? We kind of talked about the rotation and how there are spots filled there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a little bit different. So if Sasaki's posted next year, he falls under the international signing embargo, which means that you can give him a big signing bonus, but you can't give him, a ton of money from, the pool that you have to spend that year. Go back and look at Shohei Ohtani. Same thing happened there. And he ended up signing what equated to like a 9-year, $72 million deal, something like that. But I mean, obviously that was the biggest steal in baseball for the longest time. It is a very, it's a very complicated process when they are under 21, I believe is the cutoff. I could be completely out of the ballpark there, but can't remember. I haven't refreshed myself on those rules in a long time, but he would fall under that embargo. So, it's a little bit different there. I wish, it seems relatively far-fetched when you look at what the trend is. Now, listen, obviously they showed willingness to spend this offseason on the international market. That's awesome. I think it was probably just to say, hey, we're playing, we're doing the thing, come make your pitches to us. We'll try our best. But in the end, if the Phillies and Yankees are offering the same amount of money, the Yankees are going to beat them 10 out of 10 times. Sure. If the Phillies and the Dodgers are offering the same amount of money, it's like a 6-hour trip difference to get home. Yeah. It's a big deal. Same with Seattle, same with all these places, right? If those guys are offering the same amount of money, you're pretty dead in the water. There's not a lot you can do. But so especially when we refer to that embargo and there being a cutoff of how much you can spend, it becomes challenging because then it becomes about who gives the best pitch, who's closest to home, who does, it's a more even playing field than just money. So I hope, but who knows?
Yeah. The thing with like the Japanese pitchers or the Korean pitchers, or the players just in general, it seems like you kind of have to like break that barrier, like break the ice and then you can get more of them.
You just have to increase your presence. You have to know a little bit more. You have to build relationships from much earlier. it's how it goes. And so the Phillies are doing that, and kudos to them. They have especially stepped up, in Taiwan and surrounding areas. But they've made that. What I will say, I will hand it to them. When Hui Pan, you look at Hao Yu Lee, right? They have definitely stepped up, at least in Taiwan, right? So I think that that is a relationship that they are forging. I'm not sure if that relationship will be strong enough by the time Sasaki is posted to give them a leg up there. But who's to say? You never know. I mean, you really, truly never know.
I never thought they would offer Yamamoto what they offered him, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, he is a game changer. He's
No
really, really, really talented. But
he hasn't shown it this spring yet. But
I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be okay. I think he'll be okay.
Yeah, the stuff is electric. It's like undeniable.
Pretty nuts.
Yeah, the Taiwanese market is interesting too. I mean, you look at even just the Little League World Series last year. There's a kid throwing 80 or not, maybe not 81, but it was like equivalent.
It was 100. I saw it. It was a fireballer. It's pretty. I mean, in Asia in general, things are getting really serious over there. And it is really it's as things currently stand, an untapped market in terms of being able to convince. I mean, you just who is the player that just signed with a collegiate organization? The name is slipping from me right now, but a Japanese prospect just agreed to sign or to attend school for a full scholarship at Ole Miss ? Somewhere. So
Rintaro Sasaki?
Yes, Rintaro Sasaki just agreed to play collegiate ball, right? A college managed to lure him away from, playing organized baseball in Japan, and now is playing stateside for 4 years and is probably going to do quite well. Because these are guys that from very young ages start playing in real organized men's leagues. From everything that I've heard about Rintaro Sasaki, that guy's got power up the wazoo. So that will be very interesting to see how this is the first of its kind, right? So we'll see how that shapes, how that works. And we've seen American prospects go to Japan because they don't get the signing bonus offer that they are looking for from teams out of the draft. It was like Carter Capps or somebody like that went over to Korea, I think, in lieu of not getting the signing bonus he wanted from an American team. It happens, and it's cool.
It's an interesting market over there for sure. Mm-hmm. Definitely really cool to see. It's exciting too. Like, it's exciting to see that expand and to see the way it's impacting the game over here.
It's just cool to see it go worldwide. It's exciting.
Yeah. I think a good way for us to wrap this up might be talking about win totals and the division.
I'm here for it.
I think the Phillies are probably going to be landing around 95 to 97 wins. I mean, could be more than that if everything goes right.
That'd be cool.
If Bryson Stott hits 300, you could win a lot of games. And if Alec Boehm hits for his potential and keeps growing, I mean, the sky's the limit for this team. I mean, really, it is. But I can't see them taking down the Braves in the division this year because the Braves are like regular season merchants. I don't understand.
I'll tell you where you can see them taking them down.
Might start with NLDS.
Yeah.
The Braves probably fear that.
Hunter, I'll let you go first, and then I'll do mine.
Yeah, I'm with Drew. I also do not see them winning the division this year. Mm-hmm. Do not care to win the division at this point either with how the last couple of years have gone. It's just not a concern of mine. And I have them around 93 wins. I just think there are going to be some bumps along the road. Obviously, right now, we're talking about a lot of these guys. We're very excited. But once we get into the season, I'm sure we'll have you back on at some point during the season too. And we'll be like, well, what happened to so-and-so, plug and play, and there'll be a number of those at some points. And it's 162 games. There's just going to be your bumps and bruises along the way. So I have them a little bit lower at 93, but still around that same range. And I don't think it's going to be a result of them starting out 22 and 29 in June again. So let's hope.
That I have them around. I've been using 93 as my conservative total too. That's just kind of
Sure.
If I'm being realistic,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I see it going. But like you mentioned, a 22-29 start, and now you get, now you're looking at having Bryce Harper. You're looking at having, real Trey Turner. You're looking at having, I don't know, a full year of Christopher Sanchez instead of whatever the hell was going on last year. It's a very it's very enticing, and it definitely has me wanting to be more optimistic. But I think right now I'm settling on 93 as a nice conservative win total. But who's to say? Who is to say, what the ceiling is for this team? Because there are so many things that can break really, really right. So many things that can break less right. Some decline from somebody like Brandon Marsh. Maybe Nick Castellanos takes a big step back. These things can happen, but they can also happen to any team. And if you look realistically at, things leveling out for all of these players that should be playing at elite levels, and having full seasons of guys that you didn't have full seasons of last year, they're a better team this year. They just are. Aaron Nola is better than what he did in 2023. Bryce Harper, full year. Trey Turner is better than what he did in 2023, even though that last half of the season was kind of ridiculous. Alec Boehm is still looking to take a step forward. Bryson Stott is still looking to, continue building off of what he's already built. Brandon Marsh, if he can put those same numbers up with a little bit more consistent periphery data, we're pretty thrilled about it. Johan Rojas is going to make a huge difference in the field. That is, you already saw it at the end of the season. So, I mean, they just don't look worse. they don't look worse. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do. It's gonna be really fun.
The main thing I've said about the division is the Phillies could easily take it because the Braves are one major pitching injury away from disaster because their rotation depth is not deep. I mean, they go five deep. That's,
I can't say that I think that they are. I can't say that they're a pitching injury away from disaster. I think there's always a move to be made. There's always a way that they can,
Right.
AJ Smith-Shawver is good depth. So is not Jared Schuster, the Bryce Elder. So is Bryce Elder, right? But you look at Charlie Burton's 40 years old.
Yeah.
Chris Sale has a short rib elbow. It is a very it's a risky pitching strategy for sure, but they also don't make a lot of mistakes. The Braves.
True.
And I would be, as a Phillies fan, I am terrified that they were so confident to extend Chris Sale. I am terrified, so much so that I picked him up in every fantasy baseball league that I have this year, because it just works. Everything they do works, right? So it is, and obviously injuries are not predictable, and you can't really, stake a claim and say, they knew he was going to get hurt, or they knew he wasn't going to get hurt, or whatever. But I trust the Braves implicitly because they just seem to be steps ahead of everybody else when it comes to it, even the Dodgers, when it comes to, knowing what's going to work and knowing how to sign a long-term deal and who's going to succeed on a long-term deal and who's not.
The Phillies are becoming that way, though.
I hope so, but it is really, I have seen enough over the last few years to be convinced that Anthopoulos Island exists. And I don't know how they do it, but it is it's pretty incredible.
It should be studied.
It should be studied. It sure should. But no, I think they have depth, but it's definitely a risk that they are taking. And I also think it's an implicit risk to sign every player that you grow from home to a really long-term deal. Especially, Austin Riley for a long time was a free swinger. He's a big-bodied guy. Matt Olson is a big-bodied guy. Those guys can deteriorate over time. And if you're giving them all contracts where those back half of the contracts line up at the same time, it does seem a little bit risky. That being said, then they do things like Ozzy Albies and Ronald Acuna. And somehow they get away with that. So
Yeah, that's criminal.
you
It
know,
is.
Yeah.
what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
Right.
They're a good org.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about
You only
it.
prepare for so many. You don't prepare for so many injuries along the way too.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But But Alex, we want to thank you so much for coming on and spending an hour and a half with us, man. I mean, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Anytime.
appreciate it. Yeah, just let the people know where they can find you again before we head out of here.
You can find me on Twitter, not X, but Twitter, at Alex Carr MLB. I have been loving kind of taking a step back from being so serious about baseball for so long. I still follow with the same intensity. I'm just trying to embrace a little bit more of a fan's perspective, which has been really, 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 really fun. So thank you guys for having me on. I mean, a blast to talk about baseball anytime.
Yeah, we appreciate it so much. I mean,
Of course.
Couldn't thank you enough.
Always.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a blast every time.
Yep.
Yeah,
and
that's I'll go for it, Drew.
Yeah, and anybody that wants to like keep up with the pod and stuff, you can join the Discord or you can follow us on Twitter. I mean, there's a couple different ways we post on Instagram quite frequently. Hunter does most of that, but I try to keep up with the Discord and the Twitter. But yeah, you can find us there and keep up with us pretty frequently. We're always in the Discord talking. I mean, all the time. So
yeah, it's a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, that's what we're about is the fan perspective too. Like me and Drew like to do our research too, but we like to be sitting here talking. We want to talk about the vibes and all that
of course.
kind of stuff.
Best part.
That's the best part of it. So, but yeah, thank you again, Alex. Thank you again to everyone who tuned in too. We appreciate all of you, and we will see you guys next week at some point and with opening day creeping up. So thank you guys again for watching. God bless you all.